Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Twin Talk here. My name's Isaac Ellison, and I'm here with
Isaiah Ellison.
and we're here to talk about The Moral Thieves by Cherry Dimaline. All right, first off, what did you think about the book overall?
You know, I found this book very, interesting.
Mhm.
Like, I really enjoyed the storyline of how it kind of took a nice twist on how history went. And the fact that it was set in the future, how it almost flipped, you know, in modern times where we're all trying to set a precedent where, you know, everyone's supposed to be equal and everyone should have equal rights. This story set in the future where you would think we would be progressed in that sort of way. We actually reverted back to how it was in the early 1900s, 1800s, where people of color and indigenous people alike are being racially profiled against and are being used for a certain, like, they're being used for their bodies rather than what they bring to the world. And they're being treated as lesser than, which is interesting to me.
I completely agree. I really enjoyed this book. I think it was a great read. I really liked how engaging it was, and I liked how it was the narrator was from the point of view of Frenchie, which is obviously the main character of the novel. I think it was very well written to where, like, it was, like I said, very engaging. Like, I felt like you were there witnessing these events.
Yeah.
And I felt at multiple points that I was getting very invested and connected with the novel. So kind of tying off of that, what was kind of like your favorite moments in the book that you found?
I really like how at the end there was a lot of cool plot twists. Like at the end, they found Miguan's husband, who was thought to be dead the whole story, and then it kind of set up the story almost like if they were setting up like a season 2 of, like, you know, a good show.
Yes.
Right? Like it didn't end at a point where, you know, that could be just the end of the story. It leaves the reader to kind of imagine their own ending of how the story could continue. Although we didn't get to see that continuation, I thought the author did a great job of kind of setting that up and leaving the readers kind of on their toes.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was definitely one of my favorite moments. My favorite moment, I think, was when Frenchie's found family ended up finding Frenchie's dad. I think that was a great moment, especially we're about to get into it in a second about kinship and the feeling of family. And as Frenchie lost all his family members, kind of had his own, like, adopted family, and then now he's faced with blood relatives again, which he hasn't seen in multiple years, and the kind of conflict that oddly created, but at the same time, it was great to see some connections being rebuilt. I thought that was very interesting. And going into that, when Frenchie decided to stay close with his found family after finding his dad was very interesting to me, because I would think not seeing your dad for like over 5 years, you would really want to stay close, like touch up on the past and kind of rebuild that connection. But I think Frenchie did a very good job at staying strong and realizing that yes, that is still family, but he's not your only family member anymore. Even though his found family, like Miguan's and Rose and Wab and all the other characters in that found family, they're not blood related per se, but they still have that same kinship bond that
sort of
he
connection.
may have. Yes, exactly. Yeah, talking about kinship, do you have anything else to add, kind of like how kinship was used within the novel?
I'll definitely kind of piggyback off what you said. I just thought it was very cool to read that the found family that they created was comparable, if not stronger, than blood related family. Like you'll see, like online, families fighting, or you'll see families, tight knot. But in the story, it really just showed that like the connection that these people had were just as strong. Like if you didn't know any better, you would think they were a real blood related family. And there was a really good point where, like you said, like when they found his father, right? Like exactly how you said, you would think that you'd be so excited to see your blood related family, and it wasn't necessarily like that. It was like, okay, like I'm really happy to see you, happy to see you're all right, but this is my family as well now. And that kind of bond and kind of loyalty found in that kinship is very, very, very interesting to me.
Yeah, kind of going into that, it makes me think about when Minerva got captured, both when she initially got captured and when they eventually tried rescuing her, because a lot of that tied in with the kinship bond, as Minerva really sacrificed herself to the recruiters because everyone knew that the recruiters were hot off their tail after the, who was it? Let me see that. Anyways, I can't think of the name. It's gonna haunt me. But yes, after the passing, it was the young girl of the found family. It started off by Miigwans and the found family trying to build a stronger community and possibly expanding their family with some fellow natives. But it turns out they were spies, or essentially spies, where they were informants to recruiters, and so they kind of got betrayed there, and so that sense of building a stronger kinship kind of hurt them a little bit, and so they knew that they were very close from everyone getting captured and possibly killed. So Minerva sacrificed herself so they would eventually leave them alone and think that they got whoever they needed to get. And so I found that like a very impactful moment in the novel. And then everyone was dead set on getting Minerva back. You would think, that she would just be dead and gone. You gotta just keep moving forward, focusing on survival. But they, especially Frenchie, was very hard stuck on trying to get Minerva back, even though in the beginning of the novel, Frenchie was not very fond of Minerva. He thought that she was just kind of old and kind of used up. But towards the end of the novel, he realized her importance, and that kinship bond that Frenchie had clearly grew stronger. And even though the recovery mission, you may say, didn't quite work out, I found that the attempt spoke enough about it. Another thing I wanted to add, in the novel, Cherry uses punctuation or in capitalization differently than you would see in traditional novels, especially with the term story. I found that very interesting. Story with a capital S really reference to the past, like the main story that everyone had their own connections to, but that was like the core story and memory of how they got to where they are today. So it even starts back when in the 1800s, where there was the original residential schools, and all the way up to the current events to where they need to be back on the run. And that story is very important. I think that's why that is the story that is capitalized, as it is such it has more purpose of just being a story. It is clearly crucial to their survival and that knowledge, because in Miguan's Coming To story, which is a different story, Coming To story is not capitalized.
Right.
Isaac, that's how he got captured. He didn't know about the old residential schools. He didn't have a story to really have in his mind of to get that survival instinct, and he thought that he could just talk his way out of it, and he ended up getting captured. So yeah, and like I was saying, Coming To stories were more what everyone's individual story was and how they found the found family. And even though that is very important to everyone's survival still, I think it's not as much of a broad necessity. Every story did still have their own little bits and pieces of information that will help the whole group as a whole, but I think it was more like a personal story. All right, so another thing I wanted to add on, kind of like you were talking about how it was a retelling of the past, but in a future setting, which I also found quite interesting. The use of settler colonialism within the novel.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I have my own, but I would like, if you have anything to share, please go ahead.
Yeah, it was just kind of how I mentioned in the beginning, just the term settler colonialism, when you think of that term, like for me, my mind instantly goes to the past.
Yes.
Like, with slavery and how, the great story of Christopher Columbus coming over to the Americas and taking over Native American land, right? So it's interesting to have that term be brought back, but be used in the present of the story in the future for us, right? Because, it takes me back, hundreds of years, and just using the term in a different sense really was impactful to the story. And also I feel like led the readers to be more engaged, just because there was something, it was a familiar term.
Yes.
For all the readers, or I would say most of the readers. And so, the term definitely carries some weight.
Yes. I also found it interesting. Obviously, that was kind of like the basis of the novel, right? And interesting how after all what happened in our current time, right, the colonialism came back. Just like how in the 1800s, where the colonists started taking over native land, and sending the natives who previously owned that land and lived on that land, sent them to these residential schools. And you really see that happening again, where now they're not just taking the land because of resources, but they're also using the natives for resources.
Yeah.
And they're sending them to these residential schools, but in the past, as harmful as those were as well, where a lot of people did not make it out, but it was also used as a platform to strip these native indigenous people from their culture and kind of, for lack of a better term, like whitewash them. But in these schools mentioned in the novel, they're not trying to strip them of their culture, they're trying to strip them of their dreams, of their bone marrow. And I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
In both ways, they're both mentioned as schools, but I don't believe any of them serve real educational purposes. Yes, you may say the original residential schools were teaching these kids and the indigenous people of the European cultures, right? But I feel like the indigenous people, even in the past, were more losing than gaining, right? Especially in the novels, they're not gaining anything. They're really losing lives, which I feel is very intense.
You know, I'm really happy you brought up schools because, like, kind of how I mentioned about a lot of these terms that uh, you would think have a certain meaning, but it's
Yes.
almost a complete opposite. Like, you know, school is uh, a term for, you know, a place of learning and a place where you would gain. Like, you would gain the knowledge, you know, you gain experience of just social life and, you know, you just gain knowledge.
Mhm.
But these schools are stripping away from these indigenous peoples. And so, again, it's just the author did an amazing job just kind of keeping the readers on their toes and just not letting it be uh, easily like looked over, right? Like it just really set the world that they were living in and really separated it from the world that we live in today.
I agree. Very good point. Something I would like your opinion on as well. I would like to share. How would you write the sequel? How would you continue this story? Personally, so the Moral Thieves ended with the Found family failing to save Minerva, but they eventually found Isaac. Now, Isaac was supposed to be presumptively passed um, after being captured by the recruiters, but he escaped, and he was found again, and he was known to be quite the linguistic. Now, uh, through Minerva, Cherry showed the importance of language and the use of language, and that was her power to burn down the residential school, which got her strength and how really set up the recovery mission, like I mentioned earlier, because she had to get transported to a different location. So now that this new community of Frenchie's Found family and the council, they now know the importance of language and the power it holds. And since they don't have Minerva anymore, they need someone to have that kind of knowledge, which, because it was kind of lost. Some people knew bits and pieces, but no one was truly a master of language. But Isaac was that person. And I think that how I would continue the story is with Isaac being an addition to the community. I think he takes over Minerva's position in a way, where he can start teaching the children and even the adults about language and how to use it. And I think they could really use that to kind of build on their resurgence against the settler colonialism and somehow find a way to be so strong where they have to give up on this whole thing and learn how to live as equals with the indigenous along with the colonizers.
Right.
I would like to see, like, how would you, like, what do you think?
I mean, you basically left it right where I would have added. Me as well, I would like to see Isaac as a leading role, sharing the experiences that he has gained from being captured and being on the inside.
Yes.
Right? And I think it's just another big patch of knowledge that can be passed on to the found family and, you know, generations to come. I like to see, like, my take on it would be like maybe the next generation, like as the children in the found family to become the elders and to see the progression that they have made and eventually see some sort of rebellion or you know, best would be, you know, a peaceful upbringing and somehow finding their way back as equals with the settlers rather than constantly at war.
Yes, I agree. A little sidebar, kind of staying in this hypothetical sense. If you were Frenchie, how would you treat the situation differently? So how I would treat it, so in Frenchie 22 story, it was started off with Mitch and their mother, and their mother didn't make it, and then it was just them two, and then
Right.
Mitch had a very similar instance with Minerva where he sacrificed himself so that Frenchie could escape, which I also found quite interesting how that kind of connection happened. Another kind of retelling of the past and the future, right? Because Minerva happened later on, but it was a very connecting moments. But so Frenchie knew that he had to move north, and he luckily found his, soon to be found family who was also moving north. I think Frenchie really took a lot of the same steps that I would have taken if I was in that situation. I think Frenchie was very brave, especially for his age. I feel like I'd be immensely scared and maybe not as strong as Frenchie was, and how he grew to be really essentially a leader in that group. I really commend, because I personally don't think I could have done that. I think I would have been just the person to kind of sit in the back. Everyone had a job already, so I would just do my job and just focus on surviving. But what Frenchie did was really step up and want to be a leader. Maybe that's to impress Rose, the love interest in the novel, but in the end, it really just helped the group, and I really enjoyed seeing that character development. Would you have done anything differently or anything similar?
For me, if I was in this situation, I would not have been nearly as trusting as Frenchie was. Right?
Okay.
Like, when I would come across the found family, of course I'd be kind of relieved, and I would join them for the sole sense of survival.
Yeah.
Right? Because knowing my chances of survival improve with joining such a group, I would not be nearly as trusting. Like, Frenchie put his whole livelihood in the hands of these people who he really didn't know. And, that was a very bold move, like you said. Because, how we mentioned earlier in the podcast was how there was informers in the group.
Yes.
I personally would have expected that. Not because of anything that they would have done. It's just that, me personally, I don't trust people very easily. I know that it's especially in the world that is set in the story, there are people out to get me, right? So I wouldn't have trusted these people. I would have assumed all of them were informers. So kind of like you said, you'd be in the back of the group. I would be as distant as possible and just really trying to get any sort of information I could to survive, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the informants. I was curious on what you were thinking. Let's see. Riri is the girl who passed.
Right.
And after Riri passed by the two informants, one of the informants died with her, jumping off that cliff.
Correct.
Right? They had the other informant tied up against a tree and was just gonna leave him there. But Frenchie did something interesting. Frenchie had a rifle and was holding him, not captive, but making sure he didn't go nowhere.
At gunpoint.
Right? Yes. Frenchie ended up killing the guy and shooting him, which really was his first, human kill. And really his only in the novel, which was very interesting because that didn't really happen much in the book. In the sense where the indigenous were killing anyone. It was only for hunting. It was a hunting rifle, and French ended up kind of letting his emotions get the best of him there over his own judgment, and really killed the guy who didn't have a chance of having any strength. I mean, the fight was over. They could have easily escaped at that point. But
that's exactly how I would have handled the situation, right? that was the one thing that Frenchie did that I completely agreed with.
Interesting.
Not in a sense of like, I would be in the story like just out for blood.
Yeah.
But like I said, that sense of trust is very hard to be given for me. And so if I were to give someone my trust like that just to be betrayed, I would feel like just completely wrecked and just heartbroken, and just like if they're out to kill me, I can't leave any sort of chance of them escaping, and now they have information on me. I can't let that get back to the settlers. So in my opinion, that was a very smart move, but also a very impactful move for Frenchie's character. Like, as you said, violence in that sort of sense is pretty rare in the story, and so having it just like as a cold-blooded kill, right? Like no sort of defense, just straight like, I'm gonna shoot you, you can't do anything about it. That was very for me, kind of relatable, but it's a very impactful part of the story and Frenchie's character development.
Yeah, I really think that proves to be like a turning point in Frenchie's character development. Like I said, he kind of started as more of a submissive character, in my opinion, and as he was taking that leadership role, especially on that journey where they initially found those informants, he was really enjoying taking charge, and he was kind of being served as a scout for his skill of climbing trees and being able to look ahead. So that was a very interesting turning point. Personally, I don't know if I would have done it. I think I probably would have roughed him up a little bit, to be honest. But I don't think I would have been able to pull that trigger. I think what I would have done is what Miguans has done in the past, and just left them with a can of soup and some water, just enough so they could survive with the recruiters they know are coming, that they would be able to pick them up and do what they want with them, right? Because I don't feel like that was their mission, was to really seek revenge. I think their mission was more to save their own. Right. And I don't think that was the best way to go at it. But hey, I mean, I personally wasn't there. I mean, Frenchie was in those woods for years, exactly. Right? So you don't know how that could affect your mental. And so that's my best judgment, and clearly emotions took over Frenchie's best judgment. So who knows how it would have went if I was in that situation, and so on. As we're kind of wrapping up today's episode of Twin Talk, I wanted to talk to you about dreams. I found it very interesting that Cherry chose to use bone marrow as what the recruiters wanted to get as they were searching for dreams, and that was clearly what the colonizers needed from the indigenous people. As in the chapter A Plague of Madness, the Plague of Madness was defined by Frenchie as when they stopped dreaming. And I feel like bone marrow has a lot of connections as why it was used as a resource, as like how bone marrow looks eerily similar to a dream catcher. Right? And so that's another kind of side connection to dreams. And I'm also thinking that bone marrow is rich of stem cells, and stem cells are used a lot for medicinal purposes, and I feel like that may also be a purpose of why they want that bone marrow.
Yeah.
And totally. Do you have anything to add about dreams?
Not in a physical sense, but again, kind of for the author using dream as a resource, right? Like something that could be taken away from you. Like in our world, like in our current world, dreams is something that, you fight for.
Yeah.
Something you strive towards, right? Like everyone has their own ambitions, their goals, their dreams, right? but these dreams, totally different. It's like almost like a sense of culture, right? And they're taking that away and using it as a resource for their own personal gain as a society. So again, I found it very. I thought it was a great use of kind of language in that sense by the author.
All right. Well, I think that's really all the time we have here. Thank you all for joining us on a final episode of Twin Talk. Maybe, you know what, there might be another season and we can hopefully come back, talk about another interesting novel, and
They don't pay me enough for a second season.
hey, you know, who knows? All right,
You hear that?
thank you guys, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.